Watch Katie's informative speech on the number pi and compare it to her presentation outline in Chapter 11 of your textbook. Identify how Katie accomplishes each objective of speech introduction, structures her main points and subpoints, and finally, in her conclusion, reinforces her thesis statement and ends with a quotation.
3.14159265358979323 8462648 833832795 ... Most of you know the name of the number that I just recited. It is a number found in rainbows, pupils of eyes, ripples in the water, sound waves, and even DNA. It is a number that both nature and music understand, but that the human mind cannot quite comprehend. This number has sparked curiosity in many minds over the past 4,000 years. I'm talking about pi, not the dessert, but the circle ratio. Now, a class of speech majors is probably wondering if they can survive a 5-minute speech on math, but I will try my hardest to present pi as a fascinating topic, for that's what I believe it to be. I have researched this topic, finding information both technical and historical, and also fanatical. My own interest came about when I was challenged to memorize more digits than a friend of mine. I plan to inform you on what pi is, the history of pi, and why pi has caused obsessions in people's lives. Pi is a symbol that most everyone is familiar with, even if they don't know what it represents. When you take the circumference of a circle and divide it by the diameter, which is the line that goes through it, your result will always be pi. It doesn't matter how large or how small the circle, whenever you divide the circumference by the diameter, the answer will always be the constant pi. This is called the circle ratio. Now, most of you know pi to be 3.14 or 22/7. But the truth is that pi is an irrational number, which means it can't be represented as a fraction. Much of pi's mysticism is due to the fact that it's never ending. Or is it? This has boggled mathematicians for ages. They're puzzled and almost ashamed that it's so difficult to find a number as simple as the ratio of a circle. But pi goes beyond the circle ratio. According to David Blattner, who wrote The Joy of Pi, this value can be found in all fields of math, science, architecture, the arts, and even the Bible. The world record to this date of the most digits calculated is 206 billion decimal places. This was calculated by Dr. Kanada at the University of Tokyo. Although 206 billion digits have been calculated thus far, there was a time when there was uncertainty of even the second decimal place, back in the days of antiquity. Woven between pi's infinite digits is a rich history, ranging from the great thinkers of the ancient cultures to the supercomputers of the 20th century. Imagine 4,000 years ago. There's no decimal system, no compass, no paper, no pencil, but people still found ways to do math. All the Egyptians needed was a stake, a piece of rope, and the sand, and they were able to approximate pi as a little over 3. Also, the Greeks, Babylonians, Israelites, Chinese, and Mesopotamians studied the circle ratio, but all of them uncertain of even the third decimal place. Pi's finality remained a mystery until the 16th century. Peter Berkman, a former professor of engineering at CU, likes to call this period the age of the digit hunters, with each generation popping out more digits than the one before it. I will spare you the technical details of the methods they use, but keep in mind, there's still no calculator. Great thinkers like Archimedes, Richter, Shanks, and several other mathematicians that you've never heard of continue to break records. But in the mid-1900s, along with the invention of the computer, came a breakthrough in the hunt for pi. After IBM printed out 16,000 digits, it was confirmed that pi was totally random and that no pattern was to be found in its strand. But the question still remains. Why do people devote their lives to searching pi when the number is completely useless after 20 digits? Why not the square root of 2 or the sine of 1 degree or any other number with an infinite strand of digits? What's the fascination with pi? Well, the mysticism and mystery behind this unknown value has caused people to become both fascinated and obsessed. Blattner also states that more people have memorized, philosophized, calculated, and expounded upon this value more than any number in history. I want to share with you a few stories on how pi has impacted certain individual lives. I'll start with the Chavnowski brothers. David and Gregory were two brothers who were mathematicians and moved here from Russia so they could freely entertain their obsession with pi. From their own apartment in Manhattan, they built a supercomputer from scratch just so they could calculate more digits and study its use in various formulas. Have you ever known anyone who has tried to memorize pi? Maybe a few weirdos or math nerds here and there. Some do it for sport, others to be silly, but some people are much more serious about memorizing pi. Bladner states that 5 years ago, the record was blown out of the water when Hiroyuki Goto spent over 9 hours reciting 42,000 digits of pi from memory. Now, this was a rare case, but there are methods of memorization for the average memory. Some people have translated the digits into poems, clever mnemonics, and songs. Or you can just memorize them in groups of 4, which is the method that I have found the easiest. And lastly, the celebration of Pi Day on March 14th, 314. It is suggested on the ridiculously enhanced Pi page on the web that you gather with your friends at 1:59 p.m. to eat pie and to share personal stories about pie. So ends my analysis on people's obsessions. The question was never answered, though. No one knows why pi has caused such a craze or why several books, movies, and fanatical web pages have been produced on the subject. What inspired the Chavnowski brothers to devote their whole lives in search for pi? What inspired me to write a speech on this silly number? I think the answer lies in the mystery. Exploring pi is an adventure. That's why people do it. I want you to remember pi, but not just as the circle ratio, and not just as the biggest influence on math over history, but as a number that has greatly impacted people and has had an influence on everything we do. In William Schaef's book, The Nature and History of Pi, he concludes that no other symbol in mathematics has ever evoked as much mystery, romanticism, misconception, and human interest as the number pi.